Hi, welcome to Stay Off My Lawn. This is a podcast extra. And, I wanted to throw this in here just in the middle of the week. The president gave a speech last night, and part of it outlined the CCP gathering information on over 200 million Americans from voting registration systems here in America. The data included names and phone numbers, political affiliations, possibly even more sensitive information. They even tracked the times when you voted, which is, I don't know what they do with that information, but, it's out there. You might say this data is readily available, and I've heard this criticism already. That's very true. Anybody willing to buy it can get this information. I've got a story where I had somebody in Azerbaijan called my bank here in Atlanta, Georgia, and said they were me, had all my information, my mother's maiden name, my social security number, my name and address, the whole thing. They had everything. And the bank was satisfied that it was me. And he told them that I was traveling and don't cancel my card because of these weird charges. And he racked up $11,000 in 3 days. So, and the bank SunTrust was very, very good to me. They took care of everything, and that's fine. But that information is certainly out there, and I get that criticism. I really do. But this breach is record-breaking. There's over 200 million people, 220, I think is what he said. Plus, these are the Chi-Coms. These are people that want to destroy us. They're not friends of us. They'd like to destroy us from within. So if you're China, what would be your best way to destroy us? And you have to think back about that quote that Nikita Khrushchev made back in the 50s. Now, this is unverified. But he had said, quote, "We will take America without firing a shot. We do not have to invade the U.S. We will destroy from within." And if our election just even has the possibility to be monkeyed with, why in the world wouldn't you take steps to possibly stop that threat? Look, if the lock on my front door was broken, and I wouldn't sleep until I fixed it. And I think most of us guys out there would feel the same way. I think women are more trusting. Maybe that would be different for y'all, but I just couldn't do it. Or to put it another way, there's a 4-digit code on my garage door, and you punch that code in and it opens my garage door. You have access to the whole house. We never lock that door to go into the garage because we have that layer of protection out there. Now, I wouldn't go posting that code on social media or telling everybody or putting it in my email signature. But why wouldn't I? Since I suppose that somebody could find that information. I don't see how, but I mean, the chances of somebody breaking into my house are probably low at best, very slim. But why take the chance is what my point is. Securing our elections, if there's a possibility that somebody can get in there and mess with it, why wouldn't we fix that? And that's just one of many things that's been on my mind for many years, especially since 2020 when there's always been some nefarious things going on with elections, especially since we got away from paper ballots. But anyway, securing our elections is a good first step in securing a lot of things here in America. With all that said, Richard and I have played this audio from a couple of times over the years, the last 3.5 years we've had the podcast. But this is part of an interview from 1983. This is an ex-KGB agent, Yuri Bezmenov, where he talks about how the KGB implemented plan. He had, put it this way, he had defected to Canada at this time, and he was very open about things. And he died eventually after a few years. Who knows if that was shady or not? I don't know. But anyway, he was talking about how the KGB implemented plans to influence the attitude of Americans to turn on their own country. And I think that's an interesting way to go about all this. But if you think about what Khrushchev supposedly said, it makes sense that they would actually go about implementing that plan. So here's that part of that interview right here. The original interview, by the way, is about an hour and 20 minutes long. This is only 6 minutes of it. You can find it on YouTube. Watch it at your leisure. But here's a 6-minute excerpt.
Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world, that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades.
Well, that seemed very detailed and well planned out by our enemies, at least back in the 70s. The Soviet Union was our big enemy. The Cold War was a real thing for you young people. I was in the military during then. It was very serious. I believe they've been up to this for decades. I believe the Chi-Coms are the same way. I don't think they're up to any good. They would see nothing more. I think that's what I said just a few minutes ago. They would like nothing more than to see us destroyed from within. Now, the tactics of this infiltration of propaganda has changed since the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s. Now there's social media to influence people's opinions and among other things, but I believe social media is one of the big ones. And right now, nearly a third of Americans think socialism is a good idea, and that's the direction that this country should be heading. Look, capitalism, and say what you will about capitalism, it's got warts too. I mean, I totally get that. But it's been one of the big reasons, if not it's one of the big reasons why we are certainly the best country on the planet and probably of all time. While socialism makes the proletariat, or us working class for people, if you're not familiar with that term, equal. Some might even call it fair until you realize, and like Venezuela recently did, they realized that socialism makes everything fair, but it makes everybody equally poor, put it that way. And it doesn't, while the people in charge do just fine. And I think that's where the difference is between capitalism and socialism. If you want fairness, that's great. But a lot of times, just like you're in your dealings with God, man, the last thing you want on the planet is to have God be fair with you, because that condemns me to hell. Put it that way, and I believe politically and in government ways, it's the same thing. Anyway, thanks for tuning into this Stay Off My Lawn podcast extra. Don't forget you can tune in to a new episode with Richard and I every Tuesday. We can be found on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, and Amazon smart speakers. So we will see you then. Thank you.